So thank you to everyone who is here. It means a lot to me, and I hope. I'm just glad. I'm just glad you're here. I'm glad we can all be here, and this group, we were among Tom's very first students. I hear there are people here who are among Tom's very last students. And give a round of applause for the last crew. And I think there are some people who were here in the middle, in between. Tom really fostered a pretty amazing community, starting from the beginning. When he was, when I met him, he was just heading out, trying to figure out what he was doing. I don't even think he used the term dangerous writers quite yet when I met him. And by the end, he just had concentric circles of inspiration and love and hard work and just everything going on. So one of the things I want to think about tonight is just sort of how he brought that out in us, how what he offered us that inspired so many people to write, which is hard work. It's hard but meaningful work, and I know he inspired me tremendously. So the way we're going to go with this is we're going to do our part here, and then we'll open it up to some stories. I've heard from a couple people that want to come up and tell their stories. Specifically, the three that I have so far are Steve Arndt, Gigi Little, and a guitar player who may not be here. She's not here yet. Okay, so those three. But anybody else, if you want to jump in, prepare yourself and know you're welcome to do that. And then also after that, we can just kind of spread it out into stories or memories or thoughts, fragments, any shout out that you want to give. So that's the format. And I want to say Sage was going to be here. He's not here. Just send your thoughts to Sage if you want. He's just needed to stay home. So that's what he's doing. One thing that's just kind of silly, I just brought red nail polish. Tom always had a phrase, we're going to get out the red fingernails. I thought that was an awesome way to signify that we're moving from supporting work to kind of tearing it apart in order to make it better. Another way to support work. So that's floating around out in the audience, and you're welcome to use it just as a literalization of his gesture. So that's it. Am I forgetting anything? No, I remembered everything. It's hard to believe. So the question now is, who has pages, right? So Chuck Palahniuk, pages? You got pages? You have Tom's pages? Corey Ann Woodward? Susie Vitello?
Got the pages.
Pages, okay. All right, let's get started. The moon was full, and it was the February that it didn't snow. I had my flannel pajamas on and my loafer socks, and I was in the bathroom looking into the mirror, watching myself brush my teeth after One Man's Family on the radio, but before the Rosary, when my mother walked through the hallway with the wallpaper that had the butterflies and the dice on it. She went past the bathroom door in her green kimono with that look on her face, her left eye cocked. I spit. The white toothpaste turned pink with my blood, then rinsed my mouth in the sink. By the time I got to the kitchen, I could feel it too. The kitchen door was open, and so was the screen. The screen door's spring had been disconnected for winter, and without that spring to snug it back into home, the door drifted between open and closed, lost on its hinges. My mother was standing out by the gate by the time I got to the kitchen. That gate was unlatched and drifting too, like the screen door. My mother's hair blew back off her face. She'd stood herself into the wind that was blowing from a direction it had never blown from before, and the wind was warm, which was something new, something it had never been. Not in February. Chinook, my mother said softly, almost so soft I couldn't hear. Then she crossed herself. Chinook, she said again, this time loud enough for the sky and the moon. She said the word the second time as if calling out to some long-lost friend whose name she had forgotten, then suddenly remembered. But the Chinook was no friend. It was the name for the strange wind blowing. And by November, everything that had been stirred up and blown around by that Chinook since February was all settled back down again, and all was finished up. But nothing was ever the same. The woman Sugar Babe was dead, and Harold P. Endicott was dead next, and another was dead, always in threes, death, my mother would say, then cross herself. Between the drought and that year of the Chinook, by November we were all finished up too, let go of, unlatched. The house got burned down, and the barn too, along with the tool shed and most of our stuff, and we lost the farm for good. The Chinook lasted all the next day and night until the morning after. When I got up on that third day, my mother looked like her old self again. The whole time that Chinook blew on us, my mother was a mess. That's what my father said to her. You're a mess, he said, because she couldn't cook normal. My father's eggs were hard and his mush was burnt, and we had tuna casserole for supper when it wasn't even Friday. That whole Chinook time, my mother didn't put her hair up in the day and comb it out for my father at supper time, or put lipstick on, or wear her clean apron over her red house dress when it came time to get things done. Besides the cooking, my father said my mother was a mess because she had let herself go. Mom, my father said to her, just take a good look at yourself. You're letting yourself go. Hawks blew in the second morning of the Chinook and perched in the poplars in front of our house. My mother watched them from the front window, crossing herself and watching them the whole day. That night we prayed the rosary, her mixing up the sorrowful mysteries with the glorious ones, eyes still on the poplars, though you couldn't make out a single bird or branch past dark. The following morning the hawks were gone, my mother was back, normal, getting the eggs right and roast beef for supper. But those hawks showed up again, not in the poplars in front of the house, but in the stand of cottonwood trees up the river. Not that I said anything to my mother about the hawks showing up there.
The red flags that hung on the fence were made out of old flour sacks, cut into triangular shapes and dyed and writ by my mother. My father hung the red flags from the barbed wire, one every mile for the 4 miles that our road traveled to the main road to town. My mother and my father did that with the red flags long before the Chinook. In fact, those red flags hung there on that fence, maybe even before I was around. I never asked, but I don't ever remember the red flags not hanging there, marking the distance. At the second red flag you came to, there were 3 miles left before you got to the house, and right there, at the second red flag, the ground went down. On that slope you could see, on both sides of you, for just about forever. It was a plateau caused by the river going down slowly over the centuries, to the place where it is now, the Port Neuf River. A river at its widest, no wider than double the width of the main road to town. Standing there at the second flag and looking down onto the valley, you felt like you were standing on the world, and the world was in endless space, which is the case, you know. But standing there, you really got the sense that you were standing on a round ball. You had to lean back to keep your balance, to keep from falling forward and off. Either that, or you got the feeling that the world was as flat as a cookie sheet with a ripple in it, and the sky was just a big dome. At night, God punched holes in the dome with a needle that were stars. But in either case, whether you were leaning back so as not to fall off the ball, or if you were lying flat on the cookie sheet with a ripple on it under the big dome, whatever, the sky was the thing. The unstoppable sky was the thing. There was sky everywhere. Outside the windows, under the beds, between the ceiling and the floor there was sky. There was sky between your fingers when you spread them, and sky under your arms when you lifted them up, sky around your neck and ears and head, and sky pressing against your eyeballs. When you took a breath, you were breathing sky. Sky was in your lungs. My mother hung up wash across the sky. I swung in my swing through the sky. There was no escaping it. The sky was as everywhere as the nuns at St. Joseph's School said God was. Only the ground stopped it. And even then, it didn't stop there. It was all an illusion, like Mr. Energy, that magician at the Blackfoot State Fair, said. Everything was an illusion, according to him. I used to get scared at night just thinking about it. What if everything that was familiar to me, everything I knew, was an illusion? And what if I was really doing what I was really doing, was hanging in thin air, like the earth was hanging in the thin air, like I could see the moon hanging up there in the sky, a round ball just out there with nothing solid to hold it in place. Besides the sky and the gravel road and the fence with the red flags hanging on it, and the power lines, and the fence on the other side of the road, this is what you could see from the second flag up there on the plateau. You could see the road, straight as an arrow. Mormons built that road, which is the only thing Mormons are good at, besides having kids, my mother would say. Crossing herself, making things straight. That road went straight to the river, but never crossed it, because Matisse County was low on funds for a bridge. The fences on both sides of the road were just as straight as the road. Mormons built them too, I figured. On the other side of the fences, there was barley planted, or sugar beets, or spuds, or alfalfa, depending on the rotation. It was always green. On the other side of the fences, in the spring, that is. And after that, things got gold and brown, but mostly brown, especially that year. You could see our house sticking up out of the world like the tip of a sword that pierced the round ball and stuck out just as far as the other side. You could see the barn too, broad and tall. Looked more like a castle to me, brick and heavy, not like the sky. You could see the tool shed. In the sun, the tin square tool shed with its sloping roof was so bright you couldn't look at it. Sometimes I used to think that the tool shed in the sun, the sky all around it was like God. And you couldn't bear to look at it. And even if you could, you couldn't see. And that long, straight, cool rectangle of shade from the barn was Jesus. By the end of the day, Jesus always cooled down God enough that you could look at him. Sometimes the tool shed was communism. And the shadow of the barn creeping toward it was America. And sometimes the tool shed was the Mormons, and the shadow of the barn was Catholicism. Sometimes the tool shed was my father, and the shadow was my mother.
You can see the river from up there on the plateau. Well, not the river exactly, but the trees that lined the river. Out there on the cookie sheet, trees only grew along the river except for the 4 poplars in front of our house. At one time, there was a 5th, but lightning got to it. You could also see the stand of cottonwood trees up there, where the river dog legs, all 22 of them. You could see the catapula tree that stuck up alone on the other side of the river, upriver, about a 1/4 mile from the stand of cottonwoods, and under that catapula tree, you could barely make out that lean-to where the Indian woman, Sugar Babe, lived with the person. Then to the southwest, downstream and across the river, you could see that big bunch of trees that I never counted, where Harold P. Endicott lived, in his big stone house with his 5 dogs, Dobermans, hellhounds, my mother called them, and crossed herself when she called them that. You couldn't really see the big stone house for all the trees, but you could always see Harold P. Endicott's big American flag snapping in the wind up there in the sky. You could see the road start up again on the other side of the river, beyond the trees, and keep going and going until the sky got to it. And that's it. You could see the Oldsmobile maybe, and maybe sometimes my mother or my father walking across the yard, but most of the time you just thought you could see them, when you couldn't see them at all. Of course, when you got closer, say between the last of the red flags and the house, you could see the Virginia creeper on the side of the house, and the horses, and the Holsteins, and the corral, and the gas pump, and the lawn by the back porch with a fence around it, and my father's chair on the front porch, and the picnic table, and the yard, the machinery parked around, the tractor, the plow, the disc, the harrow, and all those things, all of them John Deere. And most remarkable thing, the closer you got to the house, the more you could hear, and generally the hearing didn't catch up with the doing, so my mother could walk out the kitchen door, and that spring, when it was hooked up right, she would slam the screen door back into the home. But my mother would be on her 2nd step out of there before the slam got to you. I didn't like to think about that slam too much, because it was more proof of that illness stuff, or else that my own ears were slower than my eyes. I couldn't decide which, but I already had more than my share of things not making any sense. I figured I wouldn't dwell on troubling matters any more than was necessary. At sunset sometimes, I used to like to go out on the road, in front of the house, under the poplars, and sit so the sun looked like it was going down, right in line with the road. I wondered if you could ever fly a plane fast enough into the sun so that it was always sunset. Or maybe you could shoot an arrow as big as an electric pole right at the sun. You could sit on the electric pole and hang on tight, flying right into the big red ball, going fast enough to stay ahead of any sound, silently headed for bullseye.
We never said much, my mother, my father, and me, when we drove to Mass in the Oldsmobile on Sunday morning. My mother didn't allow the radio, said it was time for reflection, so we were all quiet and examined our consciousness for sins, which I was getting to have a lot of, one particular mortal kind especially. My father drove. He always was the one who drove. And we reflected, me in the back seat like always, looking out at the red flags, counting them like mortal sins to the main road. And then on the main road, the 15 miles or so to Wind River, and then to St. Joseph's Church for 9 o'clock Mass that we always got to at 8:30 so we could make it to confession. On the way home it was different, but not a lot. Still no radio. We still didn't talk much, and we weren't reflecting anymore. We were in the state of grace. We always stopped at the Whiz Way Market, where my mother bought groceries and my father smoked viceroys and talked business with the other Catholic men whose wives were buying groceries too. I usually read comics and had a Snickers candy bar and a Coke. Actually, that is what I used to do before that year, read comics. I was still having Snickers and Cokes like the other years, but that year I was reading other things at the magazine stand. There was one Sunday in particular I recall, and it was just before Easter. I'd given up Snickers for Lent that year, so I was only drinking Coke. The day was sunny and cold. I was wearing my blue parka, my winter coat that year, and 2 pair of socks along with long johns that were getting too short. Those long johns wouldn't stay stuck in my socks even when I wore 2 pair. They'd slowly ride up, making big lumps where there weren't supposed to be any, especially on Sunday. I was catching up on what interested me most. The only woman in Elvis Presley's life was his mother, and Montgomery Clift had a secret death wish, though I never got to find out why Montgomery Clift would want to die so bad. My father told me to stop filling my head with that movie star crap and get in the car. That was the Sunday, too, that we drove to a different way. I forgot for what reason. I think my mother just wanted to try something new, so we drove across town under the viaduct. When you drove that way, you had to drive past West Center and 1st Street by the railroad tracks to the warehouse, St. Anthony's Hospital, Niggertown, 5 or 6 houses all clumped together, and the bars. It was there that we saw that woman's car, Sugar Babe's blue 49 Ford, sitting in the front of a cinder block building with a garbage can knocked over and garbage all over the front of it. There was a neon sign that said Working Man's Club in pink letters with a blue neon half moon rising above in the window. We stared at the car and at the neon sign and the garbage all over, and my mother crossed herself. I imagined Montgomery Clift in there drinking martinis in that special kind of glass, just wanting to die, and some guy from Mother's Heaven Homes in Niggertown playing the saxophone. That's her car, all right, my father said. That woman, Sugar Babes. My father slowed down the old Oldsmobile. My mother moved closer to the window, and so did I. Pat Mulakey, back at the Whiz Way, was just saying today, that's where that woman works, my father said. Waitressing. Isn't she an Indian? My mother said. Full-blown shoe band, my father said. Daughter of one of them old true shots out there, straight off the reservation. Forevermore, my mother said, which was something my mother always said. Doesn't figure, my father said. Those Indians out there don't like niggers any more than we do, and there she is, a full-blood waitressing in that place and living in one of them too, out there in that lean-to. Shh, my mother said, and pointed to the back seat with her head. Means trouble, but those kind of people just got a nose for it, my father said.
Jesus.
Okay, well, those were some of Tom's words in his, first published book. And like most of you know, that after the reading and the pages and all that, usually there was time to light some candles and tell some stories. So I think that's what we're gonna do, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, we'll shift the lighting. Usually the lighting goes down. So yeah, our original workshop was on Thursday nights, and I assume the pattern stayed somewhat the same, where you had the workshop section and then you have the after workshop section, right? So we're shifting into that. I think that changed over the years, but so all of those pieces were from Tom's first book, Faraway Places. You guys gathered that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, Gigi, where are you? Is this a good time for you?
Yeah.
All right. We will pass the stage over to you. I'm going to step aside over there. Thank you, Susie. You can stay up here if you want, or step aside. I don't know, or don't have a plan for it. Yeah. So, Gigi, and then Steve, and then the song maybe, and then anybody else. So if you have some work or some thoughts, or you just want to say, anything, you can jump in after these three.
Thank you.
If you need me, I'm here.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you all of you for putting this together. It was really important. The only reason that I'm up here is that I kind of thought that we were all supposed to read something. So I picked something to read from Tom's books. And I had this piece that I loved. It's been sort of like this special thing for me in my head that I knew he had written, but I didn't know where it was. And I always thought it was from the part that Chuck was reading from Faraway Places, and it wasn't. It was from The Man Who Fell in Love with the Moon. So I'm just going to read one paragraph that when I was first studying with Tom, it seemed like this amazing, the very end of this tiny paragraph taught me so much about what you can do with voice. I turned around then and followed the trail back up, my mother getting closer and closer. Trail ended at the big outcrop of granite rocks. Climbed up the rocks and looked over the side, and there it was, the most beautiful meadow my two eyes, or yours, would ever want to see. The grass was green, and in some places very green, and growing all over were yellow and white flowers, and the orange, paintbrush, flower, and the purple ones that stick up. That's it. All right, Steve Arndt, where are you?
I think of all the pages that have been run through the tables and under everybody's noses and eyes from all the different groups. These people that were up here before, all of us are cousins. These are our great aunts and uncles. And, the sacred country they traveled, and I love hearing their stories. But anyways, it's I kind of like using the word Spanbauerians, kind of like a movement. Anyways, I just want to tell one story, and then I have a musician friend coming up to sing a song for you. But I don't know why it was me and a couple other friends, but I ended up seeing Tom naked all the time. The first time, Sherry Blue is sitting right there. Raise your hand, Sherry. And I took Tom down to one of my old secret fishing spots on Eagle Creek on the Clackamas River, down this old grown-over dirt road that went a half mile down to the creek, down a canyon. And Sherry and I are talking with each other. We turn around, and Tom is in the middle of the river on a rock, sitting like a gargoyle naked. So then the next time there was a party at a guy named Steve Taylor's house, and he had a swimming pool. Joanna Rose was there, all kinds of people were there, and there was a diving board. And there goes Tom. And I saw his butt enter the water. Anyways, and then there was a couple times at the Haystack Writers Retreat that Dangerous Writers had for a week each year. And I drove Tom down to one, and we got there really early, so I'm going to take Tom out to the point, and I'm going to surf the point, and my writing teacher can watch me surf. It's like, my Oregon Book Award in surfing or something. But anyway, I'm surfing, I'm looking at Tom, and finally I look over him, and he's laying on this huge log of driftwood totally naked, staring up at the sky. And I think that if my surf buddies walk around the corner now, then another, this is the last time. This is the last time that I know of. There are some of you out there though. Was at the Haystack meeting. It was all over. Joanna Rose, Stephen Allred, Carolyn was there. Peter Christopher was there. And we all decided to go up this kind of private beach. Well, it was only private because it was kind of a trail that nobody knew to get down there, but there was people down there. And Peter and I are walking out, and we look out where the sand is all shiny. And there's Tom and Carolyn naked doing Tai Chi. And Peter and Christopher and I just sat in the sand and kind of looked at each other. Anyways, unbelievable gathering tonight. Thank you, Monica, everybody. Years ago, I found out a friend of mine had written a song about a character from one of Tom's books. And we had a birthday party for Tom, and it was outdoors in the summer, and Tom and a group of people were down in his lower garden. And Ashley came up, surprised everybody, and sang this song to everybody. So Ashley, and I'll let her tell you how the song came about and what book and everything like that. But Ashley has been a touring musician with an all-woman band for how many years?
You know, longer than I care to count.
Anyways, and she's a surfing buddy of mine too. Should I hold the microphone for you?
Yay! Thank you. Wow, so, you know, I was wondering what I was gonna do tonight. And I saw the news about Tom go out and, you know, I did my bit of mourning, and this is really helpful because I don't know all of you. I was given this book as a young kid who was realizing, holy shit, I'm gay, and this book really saved my life. It saved the life of my community, and I'm forever grateful. And so I was out at the Laurel Thirst here, and I was living, I don't know where, but I had just put out a little record, and I had written a song about this character, who I'm assuming is out in the shed. And I don't know if you were there, Steve, or if somebody who knew you was there, and they came up and I talked about the book and I talked about how grateful I was, and somehow my record got to Tom, and soon after I got a call where I was working at a place called SMIRC, Sexual Minority Youth Resource Center, and they had done a little, Byron Beck had done a little thing on me because I was supposed to save SMIRC from going under, and Tom saw that and he started calling SMIRC looking for me, and I was like, and you know, my colleagues were like, actually this dude called and blah 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 blah, and then at the same time, so I was starting to get a call from Tom Spanbauer, my hero, and then I heard from Steve, who was like, don't call him back, don't call him back. I'm like, what are you saying? Like, it'd be the honor of my life. And he's like, well, I got a better idea. So I feel like this is a very odd but beautiful kind of, I'm older now, so I'm having word finding problems, so I'm going to shut up and play the song. I'm grateful to be here, and I really love this man, and I'm grateful for his stories. Main Street town, North Idaho, I'm waiting on the stage to take me down the line. A word or two, so I can turn the pages of my empty life. head, I keep the place upright. Tend the bar, but I'll tend you instead. The only trade I know to make my way. Doesn't mean a thing about love, just work for hire and pay. Work for hire and pay. I like my loving loose, he said, and I like my liquor strong. Pour me another half-breed double so this day don't last too long. Bide my time out in the shed, they call me Shed for short. Leave your dollar on the dresser as you're walking out the door. The only trade I know to make my way. Doesn't mean a thing about love, just work for hire and pay. Work for hire and pay. From Devil's Pass, the sky so blue. Draw my circle out for me and you. The lazy's perfect summer day. Till the wicked world carries you away once again. Once again. Delwood was a type-O man, he wandered with the wind. His eyes were agents of the moon, he showed me what it means to live. Moved me like no other in his life and mine. I see rangeland eyes, and Laughing Will lives legendary in my memory.
So who else? Who wants to follow that?
I
Do you want to jump up there?
Or tell it from here, but,
Okay.
you know, Tom was so fascinating because he was the physical proof that we could be a writer. And it was just amazing to sit there at a table with somebody who made their living doing this impossible thing. He just manifested this idea that you could be a writer. And when he went on tour for Man Who Fell Over the Moon, he came back from tour and we were all so young, oh my God. And we were just all around him saying, what is book tour like? And Tom said, well, I was in Seattle and they took me to this big gray concrete basement. And I signed copies of my book for 5 hours. And they left me alone in this big concrete basement for 5 hours and I just signed copies of Moon. It was for a place I'd never heard of. And we said, what was it? He said, it was some outfit called Amazon. And we all just shrugged and thought, what's that?
Who else?
Come on, it's a competition. It was
Yeah,
always a competition.
Well, I didn't bring pages.
I can say, Brian here was Tom's last student. It's a hard thing to say, but here's the last student.
Yeah, I have some stories about Tom. So, Tom, I was part of the last cohort, right, when he stopped being able to teach. And then the last 2 years, I was helping Sage take care of him, helping with his medications, and I would also take him out to physical therapy once a week, which he loved. We would drive around and get milkshakes, and I would joke about us being like Archie and Jughead, which he was like, yeah, because it was sexual for him. But it was, it was a hard couple of years. I think Tom was so good at bringing the darkness out. I think, when I think of dangerous writing, like, it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. But I think to everyone it means, like, dangerous as in, these stories are so important, these stories are so emotional that they become dangerous, right? Like, bringing them out of us is dangerous.
Yeah.
And Tom created a space where people were able to pull that darkness out of themselves. But I also think that he lived with a lot of demons. And that's what a lot of the last couple of years had been like. But also, just driving around with Tom, there were so many hilarious moments, and my favorite is when we were driving to physical therapy, and sort of out of nowhere, Tom asked me, Brian, is Michael Bublé as famous as I think he is? And I was like, maybe, Tom. He's like, I really love him. He sings like an angel, and he's so good looking. I'm like, well, you have a type, obviously. But I was like, no, Tom, I don't think he's as famous as you think he is. I don't think he's as popular as you want him to be. That's my favorite Tom story.
You crushed him?
I had to, yeah, the lie that tells the truth. Yeah, so.
Last you're going to hear from me. But another person, Holly Goodman, took care of Tom like a nurse for a long time. Holly, raise your hand so we know who you are.
So more like Brian did. It was a lot of getting meds for Tom, cleaning up around the house, and just hanging out and taking him to Pilates, and also milkshakes, and also driving around looking at houses. He loved to drive like Knott Street and like up through Northwest and look at houses. But in those last few years, there was one summer, and I can't remember now if it was before or after the pandemic, that he actually sat down and wrote another book. That in that time, he was like so himself in ways that he hadn't been in any other time in that stretch. And he said, this is maybe my favorite thing, because he said this as if it was something he had never explored in writing before. He was like, in this book, I really just want to explore sex.
I heard that he was writing that book, and I asked him, I was like, Tom, what's the book about? He goes, sex!
What a surprise.
As opposed to all the other books.
What was Tom's favorite milkshake?
Oh, yeah, just chocolate. Like fish and chips and a chocolate milkshake.
Yeah. That's
Burgerville, always holding it.
Love Burgerville.
Oh, yes.
Do y'all know who Tom was inspired by? Like what writers gave him courage or who made him brave?
Tom, you know, he famously took workshop with Gordon Lish, and he had a lot of Gordon Lish stories, and he's written about them, right? The brown shoe story. Yeah, famous. You know, he was inspired by Gordon, but you know, he had kind of a love-hate relationship with him. There was a lot of sort of ego stuff with Gordon Lish, but yeah, who else were his favorite writers?
G.G. Little, maybe? Well, I think he admired the writers he introduced us to, like Mark Richard, maybe Temple. And they came out of Gordon Lish's classes too, so there's some of that through all of it.
Yeah, and he was a Peter Christopher was like
right.
Peter, and their writing is, you know, has some you know, their cousins, you know.
Chuck did a recent post about how Tom had judged one of your books. You said something like it was something of like, "Wow, that's not right," like something that it like rubbed him the wrong way, or he had some kind of commentary. I'm curious for the other authors, did he have any take on your works that are like fun to hear?
He told me I had a really, really bad first draft of the novel.
Was he right?
Yes.
Oh my God!
I tried to write in second person one time. Don't do this.
I really didn't know to revise until I met Tom. I would just write something and toss it off, toss it off, toss it off. And he said, Monica, you don't need to bring something new in every week. You need to revise. And that was like that was like an earth shaking, like really, right? It was like permission, but also kind of a command.
Did you do the look over the glasses thing when he told you that?
I think so. Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm not just writing one liner.
The first time I had the 1 hour, you had to do a 1 hour,
Oh gosh.
$20 in order to get into the workshop.
Uh-huh.
And going into Tom's right after work in my tie and then, you know, Tom looking at my piece of crap. And then he just looks at me and he goes, so, the first time you ever ejaculated, did anything come out? This is before boundaries had been invented.
That's such an interesting.
And I had $20 at stake. I had $20 on the table. I was going to come away with something.
That was a lot back then.
Well, did you answer?
So I said, and he said, before I could answer, he said, that's where Lish would go. That's the kind of disclosure I expect from you in workshop. Because Lish would expect the kind of disclosure from you. Did anything come out? And I said, no. Nothing came out until like maybe the 5th time. And I suddenly realized this is a class I want to take. So yeah, Lish went there too.
You know, I just took a weekend workshop with Tom back in the early 90s when all y'all were being super great. And, but what saved me during the pandemic was starting the Pinewood Table with Stephen Allred and Joanna, who had been, you know, part of the Tom movement. And I gotta say, listening to y'all reading his stuff up here, I'm like, I know this. I know why he chose these words. I know why. It all made sense to me. And it makes me feel great that I feel like I'm actually learning the stuff that he was teaching all of you through these other folks. And with our like splinter group of the Pinewood Table, it continues. And so that was, it was wonderful for me to experience that tonight.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it alright to ask another question? I'm a total outsider. So when y'all were drawn to him as a teacher or a, inspiration, what aspects of him attracted you? Just for your individual experience, like what drew you to him?
Well, I just want to say, when I met him, I was pretty young, and I'd had a major dental catastrophe, and I was not in good shape. I was really skinny, and I had a shitty year, and
It was, I'm gonna just, for color. Monica didn't always have the $20. Tom and Michael Taylor were furnishing their first house, so he made her bring a piece of furniture every Thursday. Show up with some Japanese paper lamp.
She would steal from somebody else's house.
I did once trade a big piece of marble, or maybe it was granite, but that piece of granite was given to me for my birthday by a neighbor, and I saw it
doesn't
matched.
make any sense at
It
all.
matched. It literally matched a broken wall on a bank. Somebody broke that wall and stole that granite, and it was my birthday present, and I gave it to Tom. And he made a table, and that's how I got my glasses. They robbed the bank, but just the wall.
That's a beautiful story.
Really,
Oh, no, go ahead.
really early on, we were so young. And he said, as a team building thing, you all can show up here on weekends and do my yard work. And pay me. It was when he and Michael had bought that really rotted out, shitty house in John's Landing. It was right below the Terwilliger Curves. So all night long it was exhaust brakes, Jake brakes, just blaring into that house.
But you could see Mount Hood from.
As long as you didn't have to sleep there, it was a great
As
house.
long as you stood up on the stairs through that little window, you could see the mountain.
And Tom would have us come on Saturdays and pull all that rotting, rusting junk out of the yard. I feel privileged to do so.
It's genius.
Well, I've said this before, but the first night I went to Tom's house, there were no front stairs, nothing, no front stairs, like a door up high and nothing. And you had to figure out how to get in, and that really didn't seem like what writing was all about to me. I was like, okay, I gotta get in there somehow. I gotta do it. And it gave me the tenacity to get a book published. You know what I mean? If you get in that house, you can start your path. It was just condemned. I mean, it had a condemned sticker.
I remember when he got that furnace, right? That furnace that yeah, he's so proud of it. Listen to that, it's heat.
Wait, Brad, didn't years later, like recently, you end up at that house doing work?
Yeah, has the same gate as the other one. I go, I never visited that gate.
Oh,
But it was a different gate, and then it's just, cause it,
It was Tom's gate.
they look exactly the same. Yeah, it's amazing.
Brad is a contractor, if anyone.
And a brilliant writer.
Yeah.
I wanted to answer that question.
Thank you.
I'm Robin, and I have the opposite of imposter syndrome. If I'm there, I just think I belong there. And I kind of felt that way about the table too. But I also didn't want to write like Tom. So I just was there and I never read his work, and I didn't really read things anyway, I was just writing. And I didn't want to write like Tom, and then I'd been in workshop maybe 3 years, and I thought I should read something of his. And so I learned how to read, and then I read In the City of Shy Hunters, and I was like so humbled, and I realized that I was writing like Tom. Because to write like Tom is to write like yourself. It just is telling your truth the only way that you can do it. And I was like, oh, this is what, like Brian was saying, the danger is
is like you being yourself on the page and then sharing it with people. And so I think for me it was to write, what inspired me was that he was so raw and himself, and I don't want to say unapologetic because he actually, I think, was a little apologetic, but that was honest.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm not gonna answer your question other than Chuck actually recommended Tom years ago that I wrote this stupid fan thing to him when I was like 21, and he's like, I don't know if you can afford it, but go check out this guy. He's a really good teacher.
You could like
He's
break his
amazing.
yard. You could
I
break
mean,
his
it's ridiculous. But I still remember for his 63rd birthday, we did a surprise party. And I'd only been in the workshop for a couple years, but I'd never really hung out in the upstairs part. And so Sage is taking him out into this dinner, we're gonna bring him back in and everybody show up. But then I'm sitting there for like an hour and a half, just standing around this man's like house that I don't know what to do in. I'm just like, wait, I'm just supposed to stay here and wait and just be in this like private space that I've never been to. But of course then, everybody shows up and he's surprised and it's ridiculous and it's wonderful, but it's just like one of those things of just being like, feeling like I finally got into this different way of seeing this man and eating around this stuff while we waited to surprise him with 50 people that were there. I don't know, it's a really interesting memory.
You were in the inner chambers.
I guess
You didn't know
so.
what you were doing?
Or just like violating his personal space. One of the two.
You didn't go in his underwear, did you?
No, I did not. I thought about it.
Yeah.
So I was at the table for, 3 or 4 years. Hi, everybody. I love you all so much. And I left because I had kids. I had my first kid, and I saw Tom after my son was born. He was really little, and I was still in that like bleh phase of just like gooey magic land when you have, hopefully some people have had a child. And I saw Tom, and I was like, Tom, hold on, like wormhole. So one of the reasons I loved Tom and the table so much is I felt so loved by him. Like I felt so accepted and so loved, and it didn't matter who I was or what my history was or what my day was like or what my writing was like. I felt totally seen and loved by him. Okay, that. I had my first son. I saw Tom right after, and I was like, Tom, I finally understand. I was like, I know you don't have kids, but I finally understand the way you love us. You love us like we're all your children. Thank you so much.
I gotta ask, what year were you at the table?
Yeah, you want dates, huh?
Tom's Landing or was it Tuffy?
Yes, thank you, good. I left in 2011 because my son was born, so I was there from, I don't know how many y'all guys, like
2009-ish, 8-ish?
Yeah, I was gonna say 2008,
2011, something like that, yeah.
Who's the longest runner?
Yeah.
Who like was with the most groups?
Yeah.
Gigi,
yeah. I think
2005 is
What? When did the table start? What year?
1990.
Wow. Wow.
I started out at the art museum with him, and he mentions this word called horses. What are horses? And I said it's a metaphor, and he gave me that side. I want to do my own side.
I love the horses. It's totally helped me so much.
Well, I don't know if there's a position for the shortest amount of time studying with Tom. Hi, my name's Crystal. And a little over a decade, by sheer luck, I was pulled into that room in Southeast. And I fought so hard to stay, but at the time I couldn't stay. I also had a little baby.
Fucking children.
And, right, there's a theme. And it would turn out with time, I would discover that I was also in a very abusive marriage. And it took 7 or 8 years to leave that marriage. But I guess my point is the impact of that man and like what he teaches and the impact of being with other writers, because I never stopped writing. And I've had a lot of teachers over the years, but like his voice has been in my head like the whole time, the whole time. And so thank you, Monica, and thank you for hosting tonight, because it was really nice to just come and hear some more stories about him.
I'm glad you're here. Yeah.
Okay, I know the guy that was the shortest amount of time. Some man stumbled in one night, and I'm not kidding, and Tom let him stay, and he was very tall, and he was over there furiously writing. And one day I went like that because we were both pond scum, and it was one word on the whole page, and the next week he robbed a bank.
I remember that, yeah.
He was there a while, and like at the table, like cut in line because of his jawline.
Yeah.
And because of how tall he was.
Mark Rothwell was his name.
Mark. I liked him.
I remember when Tom said, and Tom told the story, he said, we said, what happened to Mark? And he said, guys, you didn't hear? We said, no. He said he robbed a bank. And we all he told us all at the table, and like 2 weeks prior, Mark had been there.
That's one way to get
And
your
he had
book
saved
written.
the bank. He had saved the bank.
It's the same day.
He
Yeah.
first saved the bank from being robbed, then he robbed it.
Yeah.
What was the word?
That's a double level, huh, Brad?
I think it was Dad. Do you remember the one word on the whole page in pen? He might have had several, he might have had a notebook of Dad.
So dad, he was a dad, and he was maybe like, don't rob the bank.
We just used too many letters to get there.
How many of you guys were pond scum of Once Upon a Time?
I was always offended by that, and I always told Tom that. and when he would tell me that like when I was sitting on the couch in my special place, where in back of the table, he had a way of like, if you thought you were being your most authentic self, and that you'd really peeled back the bullshit, he could find like the one place and say, go toward that. For me, in the gentlest way. And I would find stuff that I didn't ever know was inside of me. And when not finally, because I was among the last, like us three, Tom was like, you need to sit at the table now. And I was like, no, I'm not. And then he was surprised and let me stay where I was. And then like a while later, he was like, come, you have to come to the table. And I was like, I'm not. You said I could be when I'm ready. And he was like, I don't, okay. And then like a while later after class, he had me stay behind and he was like, you're not sitting back there anymore. So you either sit at the table or, and I was like, and I didn't, it was sad to be at the last table.
Yeah.
And it was sad to watch the change.
Yeah.
The thing about pond scum though, is it wasn't so terrible because you got to actually give Tom pages
Yes.
and sit one-on-one,
Talk about
you know, for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes.
And it was
one-on-one.
cheaper.
So, pond scum's not all.
And you didn't have to hear 7 people say the same thing about
Yes.
your cases, like it was their idea. Right.
It was scary going in there and hearing these amazing writers and just have that space to get used to it and go. I mean, just that teaching just was amazing. I had one thing, that when I was writing Punky Spills, there was a time I just wrote some pages about a moth, and the character eats this moth when he wakes up. And we were sitting there, I was reading the pages, and this green moth flew and landed on the pages. This is the testament to the magic of that place.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And I looked up at Tom, and he just nodded to me. So I picked it up and I ate it.
Love that story.
That was on the body, right?
Just one moment of hesitation and then.
How did it taste?
Like a moth.
So was it your first mom?
Yeah.
I need more detail.
Fuzzy, like peach compared to a nectarine?
It was a cabbage-white butterfly at dinner.
Was it?
I remember because I had an argument with Sage. Protected or not, and Sage insisted that it should have been killed because it destroyed his garden.
Did you update the part about flavor after that?
I don't think you did. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm confused about this pond scum concept. Clear this up for me.
So is Shannon.
There was the big table in the middle of the room, and then there were couches around the outside. And if you were at the table, you were at the table. And people at the table read every week if they had pages, and if sometimes there was left over from the week before. And then if you were pond scum, you were like waiting and hoping to get to read. But it was always like, it was always a competition, right? So it was always like people at the table would tear each other apart. And you got like 20 people, trying to like prove to Tom that their comments are better than everybody else's comments. Everyone wants to impress Dad. So there was the table, and then there was pond scum on the outside.
And it was not Tom. Tom did not make that phrase. That came from, I think, Diane Ponte.
Yes.
She created the phrase pond scum.
Because she said that's how it feels to be waiting to get to the table. It feels like you're pond scum. But no one explained that to me, and I'm like, okay, I'm pond scum now. I just gotta accept that.
Also, you could learn a lot if you just listened from
Yeah.
that position.
Oh yeah.
It was a good place to be. If you wanted to be in the room and listening to some amazing writers and some not amazing writers, then you could also learn from that. You were just lucky to be there.
It was the only place I took notes and like have definitions of what a horse is or what OTB is, and then you get to the table
The
and it
lexicon.
feels
The lexicon.
fast.
Yeah.
So horse, like what is horse?
That's the metaphor you were talking about. It's